Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. Thank you for joining us on the program today. In the 1880s, from central Montana into western Dakota Territory, hordes of outlaws terrorized the region, rustling, robbing, and killing. Representatives of law enforcement were non-existent at that time. Finally, a secret group of determined cattlemen, led by Granville Stuart, abandoned their ranching responsibilities to hunt down and destroy the lawless predators. The book, 12 Quiet Men, is the story of the vigilante cattlemen known as Stuart's Stranglers. 12 Quiet Men is a remarkable historical Western-based book on real events in the lives of these remarkable men, real cowboys who took back the West. Now, the book is not just a story about vigilantes, but about life in the West, written by Michael Edward Little. Michael was born on a cattle ranch in Montana, served in Vietnam, a successful career as a mechanical designer and mechanical engineer. After moving back to North Dakota to be with family, he began his writing career, and the book we're talking about today is 12 Quiet Men. Michael Edward Little, our guest on This Week in America. Michael, welcome to the program. A great story. Thank you for coming on the program with us.
Well, thank you very much.
What really makes this fascinating is this is a historical novel. It's based on fact that you heard and really didn't know whether this was true or not when you first heard it. Go back to 1962. You're working in Montana on a ranch, and you hear this story, and you're not sure at that time. It stuck with you over the years, but you were not sure whether this was fact or fiction when you heard the story.
Well, I didn't have a clue, but I knew the rancher reasonably well, and I don't believe he ever told me a lie in his life. So when he told me the state used to be overrun by the outlaws and robbers and rustlers and things, that was the first I'd heard of it, but I never forgot it. So when I finally moved back to North Dakota, after I retired from engineering, I finally had a chance to investigate what that rancher had told me like 40 years earlier.
Yeah, and by investigate, you spent literally years and a lot of time and money as you did the research. This is not something you took a couple of stories you heard and you fleshed them out and you made a book out of it.
That's
12
exactly
Quiet
right.
Men. I mean, this is based on research.
And got some help from the Montana Historical Society and from the North Dakota Historical Society, too, that all that stuff put together prompted me to write my book. I'd always wanted to write a book since high school, but I never had the time or the story. But once I found out what the rancher told me was absolutely true, I decided to write my first book.
Well, your high school English teacher was right. As you're a senior there and you're writing, he's saying, Michael, you're pretty good at this. You should be a writer. You went off in a different direction, but years later came back to writing the book after you retired.
When he told me that, I just about fainted. I'd never given writing a thought, but I read a lot when I was a kid in high school.
The book is an excellent read. It's 12 Quiet Men. Our guest on the program is Michael Edward Little. His website is 12quietmen.com. Book, of course, available at Amazon. You can go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on directly. Let's talk about when you were doing the research. And again, the more research you did, the more you found out the story is actually true. And you went back to some territorial newspapers from the time. That had to be a real unique perspective. It's not somebody years later recollecting, stories they heard. This was actually newspaper accounts at the time.
Well, absolutely. One of the papers I read that I really got a kick out of was the Badlands Cowboy, which is published in Medora, North Dakota, when all these rustling and outlaws were going on.
The book, The 12 Quiet Men, picks up in let's go back to mid-1980s, 1884. The area we're talking about a little different, eastern Montana and the western Dakota territories. So this really shows us how the West was won, right? I mean, this is like the primitive years back there when there was no law enforcement. It was people trying to make lives for themselves.
Absolutely. There was very, very, very little law, and as a consequence, the outlaws just ran wild for years and years and years.
You talk about at the beginning of the book the two cowboys that are pinned down by the bad guys as they catch these guys branding stolen stock, and this is where it all begins. Talk about that, because that was what pretty much standard at the time. The people that had the ranches, that worked in the ranches, had to be vigilant constantly, or the bad guys were coming in and taking.
Absolutely, and the ranches were absolutely huge. And therefore, it was really easy for outlaws to rustle stock and use a running iron to change the brands on them and steal the stock.
I mentioned that this is fact-based. What is really interesting is the fact of your background. Let's talk about that for a second, because this is not somebody that went and pulled down a couple of books and decided to write on it. You actually, at least in modern day, led that life out there. You've got a ranching background, been riding horses since age 5.
I've been riding horses since I was 6 years old, and I was born and raised on a mixed ranch in Montana. By mixed, I mean we raised thousands and thousands of sheep. We raised them for the wool. We didn't raise them for the meat. We had hundreds and hundreds of cattle, and our horse herd was about 50 horses. So it was a mixed ranch because we had, horses, sheep, and cattle. Our ranch was just north of Yellowstone National Park, so the country was absolutely beautiful. But you can't eat scenery.
Yes. Our guest on This Week in America, Michael Edward Little, author of the book 12 Quiet Men. The book's available at Amazon, available as well at Michael's website, which is 12quietmen.com. I mentioned in the beginning Granville Stuart. He was responsible, basically had enough out on the back porch, called some of his hands together and came up with this plan that, okay, we don't have anybody officially to protect us. We need to protect ourselves. Talk about that story and how that all came about.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, at that time, there were hundreds and hundreds of outlaws running all over Montana and in western North Dakota, too. And they were picking people clean. There was no law. There was very little law, put it that way. So, thankfully, Granville Stuart decided we got to get organized here and slow these people down.
And this was a quiet society, and this is where, obviously, 12 Quiet Men. What he put together about a dozen people that really decided we're going to be the Avengers. We are going to go do what nobody else is doing for us.
Exactly.
Talk about just how bad it was out there. Talk about some of the crimes perpetrated by I'll call them the bad guys at the time. I mean, it really made life quite dangerous and miserable for the people living there.
Well, yeah, if you didn't see your stock, if you were gone for half a day, you had no idea if they were still there. I mean, the rustlers just went wild. It was insane. There were newspaper reports of the rustlers raising cane in Montana and North Dakota all the way down to Salt Lake City, Utah. So lots of newspapers were talking about these people driving people nuts in Montana Territory and just raising cane. But there wasn't any law or anything to really slow them down enough. But Granville Stuart and the Stuart Stranglers, as they were called in the paper, Stuart Stranglers decided they'd had enough, and they decided to thin the herd, and I think they killed over 100 outlaws.
Yeah,
in a year or two that it took.
Yeah, you talk about a couple of years when they're out there, avenging what's going on, and it really sent out a message. During that time period, and it's fascinating to go back to, and we're looking at 1884 when this all began, the Northern Pacific Railroad is just new in the area, and it was something that the Vigilantes used to their advantage, didn't they?
Absolutely. I mean, it was a dawn of civilization for the West, and that's a pretty amazing period of time, really.
Yeah, we've read about that in history, but it all comes to life as you're reading the book 12 Quiet Men. The book is available all across the country. You can find information at Amazon or Michael's website, 12quietmen.com. The novel is quite likely the most authentic Western ever written, is one of the reviews. What's it like when, and you put years of effort into meticulously researching, this is a historical novel, so you take experiences and you write about them in the book 12 Quiet Men. When you find out people, and a lot of these are people that say, I read a lot of Westerns, and this really is authentic. That has to be validation for literally all the time and effort and money that you put into putting the story together.
Well, absolutely. And one of the things that I incorporated into my stories, ranching stories that I know really happened.
Well, yeah, that's interesting because it is a whole different life out there, and you talk about some of those. Well, let's discuss those. You've got the bunkhouse cook who's using bear roast. Talk about that story.
Oh, that was funny. I knew the cook that happened to. One of the this cook was working on the Sun Ranch in Montana, which is a big ranch, and one of the ranch hands out there gave her a roast from a bear, and she had one wrangler that worked on the ranch that swore he'd never eat bear, but she was going to be smart, and she roasted the bear meat for him, for everybody really. And just as they were getting ready to eat dinner, this dang bear roast fell on the floor, and all the dogs jumped up and ran for it. And as soon as they smelled the bear meat, they all burred up like they went crazy. I mean, they just looked like porcupines. Anyway, it really caused quite a fuss in the bunkhouse that night.
That's a great scene in the book, 12 Quiet Men. Also, and we talk about how people really had to be meticulous in how they guarded their stock there. You've got a depiction of a guy who's actually locked in his root cellar while the bad guys were out stealing horses from him. I mean, you really need to be vigilant all the time.
That comes from real life. That happened to a local rancher here in North Dakota. Told me that story because that happened to his neighbor.
Well, that's the kind of historical information you get in the book 12 Quiet Men. And I understand after the book came out, you get a call from your publisher that a gentleman in that area out there wanted to get in contact with you because his grandfather told him the same stories, and it was sort of validation of exactly what you wrote because you're there getting stories basically the same that you heard them, the same story.
Absolutely. It was wonderful. The rancher that contacted my publisher wanted my phone number or my email address so he could get in touch with me because the farmer that contacted my publisher, his grandfather was an early pioneer in Maiden, Montana, which is right outside of Lewistown up in the mountains. And he helped a sheriff ride out and take custody of some of these rustlers that had been captured. He told a heck of a story. He left all this stuff in his notes. This farmer's grandfather left a bunch of notes and stuff they'd seen and experienced and things people he knew and everything. It was remarkable. So this farmer that contacted me, he was the first person from Montana, the first Montanan to contact me about my book. And when he contacted me, he validated my book. He was a nice fellow. He made me feel wonderful. Anyway, I don't want to give his name. He's passed away, sadly, but he was a really very, very nice person. And what he found his grandfather's notes in his father's house, kind of squirreled away just to make sure they'd survive. But he started reading all those notes that his grandfather made and found out some interesting story that tied directly to my book. And he validated my book when he contacted me.
The book is 12 Quiet Men. Our guest on the program is the author Michael Edward Little. The book is available all across the country. Information at Amazon. Information available at Michael's website, 12quietmen.com. And you can link on directly at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. It's a thrilling historical Western, but it's more than that. It's a story of friendship, loyalty, and sacrifice. You've done an excellent job bringing out not just the action of the time out there, the aspect of it that we sort of come to expect when we're reading Western novels, but I feel like when I read it, I understand the people a little bit more. Obviously you wanted to tell the story of the people, not just the events, but the people as well, so we get to know who they are and what they went through in settling the West.
Well, absolutely. It was quite a struggle for everyone, really. But the other thing about my book is it comes in ebook version, so you can put it on Kindle or Nook or something like that.
Yeah, that makes it nice that you can get all the information on that. We can go to Amazon, you go to Mike's website, 12quietmen.com. What's the significance of 3777? I understand that when the rustlers were hung, that was inscribed in them, and with the Montana State Patrol had that on a patch. What's the significance of that?
Those numbers, well, okay, people started using those numbers in Alder Gulch in Nevada City in Montana to mark the bodies of horse thieves and things like that. Nobody really knows what they represent, but they were used by early vigilantes in Montana, and they Granville Stuart thought those numbers came from the California gold fields. And that's where a lot of the Montana prospectors came from originally, from the California gold fields.
And then
because they did discover gold in Montana, over in Alder Gulch and around there in Nevada City and all that.
Yeah, and I mentioned the patch with the Montana Highway Patrol. A couple minutes left in the program. What has this book meant to you? How has this changed your life? Like I said, this started in 1962 as a story that intrigued you, and later in life, after retiring, you went back, looked into it, found out what you were told was accurate, and you wrote the book. How has this changed your life? I would think this would give you a whole new appreciation for who you are and the part of the country you live in.
Well, absolutely, and I always appreciated people all of my life. That's how we learn things in life, is by listening to other people and their experiences, and, that's how we move forward in this game called life.
Yes, and the book is 12 Quiet Men. The website is 12quietmen.com. It's an excellent read, and then when you read the reviews, and again, I mentioned that people that like Westerns, suddenly they're reading the book and they're like, this may be one of the best ones I've ever read. They like the historical accuracy. They like the job you've done in describing the characters. What does that feel like? And again, I go back to your high school teacher. He saw something there that you didn't even realize you had at the time.
Well, I actually loved the experience. I did tons of research into the book itself. The fact is, in my book, I quote, 10 or 15 newspapers of the day that talk about the vigilantes and talk about the outlaws and the rustlers and all that. So my book is backed up by historical fact.
So much success with the book 12 Quiet Men. Are you working on another project?
Oh, sure. I write books all the time.
What can we look forward to have you back on the program? What can we look forward to next? I love 12 Quiet Men. Western theme again?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was my one and only Western, but because I was born and raised in Montana, it just came naturally to me, writing the Western. I mean, I enjoy those people. Montanans are great people. I love them.
This was, I mentioned in the beginning, an untold story. Why do you think that was? Because it's a fascinating story where their areas they have no law enforcement people out there, no lawmen, being overrun by vigilantes and by the rustlers, and they determine we have to save what we're trying to build out here. We have to take it upon ourselves to rid ourselves of these people. Why has this been not? I can see this as a movie. Why is this a story that's untold until now?
I really don't know, but I personally found the story fascinating to know it was actual and it really happened, and not just a bunch of made-up Hollywood nonsense.
Yes, and that's the nice thing. As you're reading it, you're knowing, okay, this is a little bit of history. This is a lot of history, and tells us a lot about the people, that the pioneers that went out and settled the West and what they had to overcome. The book is 12 Quiet Men. The author, our guest on the program, Michael Edward Little. The book is available at Amazon, again, available in Nook and Kindle fashion as well as in the normal form. 12 Quiet Men is his website. Our website is thisweekinamerica.us, and you can log on and link directly to Michael's website and get information on the book. Michael, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Really enjoyed the book 12 Quiet Men. Thank you for being with us on the show.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
It has been our pleasure. You are listening to This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.